Welcome back to our talk with Dr. J. Michael DiMaio, who is leading the effort to obtain FDA clearance for the DeepView diagnostic. Spectral AI just submitted a DeepView application to the FDA after years of work. What should we expect to see over the next several months?
So the FDA process is an iterative process. So over the next several months, as you said, we submitted the application in June, just last month. And so the FDA will return with questions, and we will respond to those questions. So over the next several months, there'll be a back and forth between Spectral and the FDA to make sure we answer all those questions. So in approximately 9 to 12 months, we expect all those questions to be answered. And if all things go well, we expect to yield clearance by the FDA for the DeepView device.
Okay. And what type of application did you make? And keeping that in mind, will it be easier when you go after another indication next time?
Certainly will be easier to go after the next application or indication, as the official word calls it, because by looking at the healing or non-healing potential of burns, which is what this application is about, we will be able to flip over to other wounds where some skin's been damaged, or there's been certain, be it trauma, be it amputation or diabetes, some skin wound that is the question is whether or not it has a healing potential. Maybe a surgeon's going to put a skin flap on that. Maybe there's going to be an amputation of a toe where you need to close the skin over that amputated toe. All that is called a viable wound bed. So we'll be looking at whether or not we'll be training, actually, DeepView to be able to determine a viable wound bed.
Okay. So then if you do submit for evaluating wound beds, then instead of taking about a year for approval, it could take substantially less time.
That's the plan and hope, because we're going to build upon what we've done already for this current application.
You'll have a precedent or a
correct.
Yeah, you'll have a precedent for the device.
Well, not just for the regulatory pathway, but of course for the payment pathway as well for reimbursement. So I know you didn't necessarily ask that initially, but the regulatory and the reimbursement go hand in hand, of course. So we're working on both parallel.
So there'll be a reimbursement code available at some point.
Right.
And then as soon as you get that established, it makes it much easier to go for the next one. Well, that's great. Yeah, you're doing all the hard work now.
Besides a viable wound bed, you have a viable product. Yeah. Because you have the reimbursement strategy as well.
Okay. Well, it's always the initial efforts are always the hardest.
Yes.
So as we look back at the regulatory side of things, what does the timeline look like? I think first, first you submit to the FDA, then the FDA accepts your application, then you have some back and forth with the FDA, and then they perhaps assign you a target action date. Can you run us through all those parts of the regulatory process?
Right. In about 60 to 90 days, you get initial feedback from the FDA, a series of questions. You have a time to respond. And all those go back and forth. And again, we're a breakthrough designation, so we have the de novo pathway going forward. And so we'll answer those questions, get some more questions back and forth. And then once we get again, I have to be careful because the FDA is the one that makes the decision, so please don't misinterpret my words that we know exactly when it's going to happen. But we fully expect in 9 to 12 months to be able to get that clearance. But to your point, once we've built that precedent, if we have more iterative changes to the device, we will submit another what's called a 510K.
Okay.
You have a predicate device, which is DeepView, and we can build upon that to make changes and improvements in the device.
Okay. After clearance, you'll be looking at deploying the device. And that's always difficult. Commercialization is always difficult for small companies, especially. However, you have a little bit different situation, which makes what you're doing a little bit or very attractive, I think. BARDA is going to be helping you. They've actually I don't know if they've identified hospitals that may use this, but they've identified at least a number of funds that can be used for the deployment. Tell us how that works and why it's less risky than perhaps what other product developers have to do in the medical
Right. Well, the federal
space.
Government, in their foresight and vision, the contract that we're operating under, and I can't promise. The federal government always has the ability to add or subtract to a contract, but the contract includes deployment of the devices, rolling out to a number of centers that we have already got commitment to. So to answer your question, it'd be a combination of government rollout via their support, and commercial rollout in parallel as well. Lease the devices because they don't want to own them. The government doesn't want to own things.
Okay,
so
right.
And then and then what I'm going to probably do is do a service agreement.
Okay, right. So for every scan, there's a fee or something associated
No, I
with
have like
that.
an annual. You have the machine in your hospital.
Oh, and you can. So you can do as many scans as you want.
Yeah, we're still debating that, but the bottom line is the government's going to buy the device or purchase or lease or something.
Okay.
So your hospital have a device. and then Spectral will be able to charge a servicing fee,
Well,
licensing fee.
how does that work for very low volume areas, which may really rely on the DeepView device to be the expert because there's no burn surgeon nearby in rural areas and things like that? Is that something that's been considered? Or?
Oh, absolutely. So what happens, we keep talking about burn centers, and that's where most of the research has been done with the government, right, with burn centers. But we fully realize that probably 40% of burn transfers are inappropriate. They should have gone somewhere, they didn't go, or they went to an advanced center and they didn't need to go there. So to your question, absolutely, people will be able to use DeepView and be able to use the predictive analytics in DeepView to give them a better idea that this is a significant burn or it's not. So when they call a burn center and they can say, well, DeepView says that this is whatever it is, that will help triage a patient home to another hospital or to a burn center. So this is a very critical piece. So it'll help many patients.
Well, I mean, I can think in one situation where even one successful scan could save a life flight. What does that cost? I mean, I don't know, $20,000, $30,000, $40,000. I have no idea, but I mean, you save quite a bit of money if you make an accurate assessment. In some rural area that could only be accessed by. By a flight.
I keep saying decision assist, and so that's the purpose. It's what the government says it's going to be. It doesn't make the decision. It assists the physician. But in your example, it assists a physician in a small hospital or a non-burn center hospital to give you a bit more information that you can transmit and make a decision.
So what settings does DeepView add the most value? Because if you're initially going to a burn center with burn surgeons, they probably know what to do and they have a whole thing set up. If you're in an area with a small hospital and you come in with a burn, that's probably, well, you tell me, is that where it adds the most value, or where?
I would say both. I call it TNT.
Okay.
Triage and treat.
Okay.
So in the smaller areas, that would be triaging.
Yep.
They may not have the expertise to treat the burn, so they need a triage. Do I need to send home? Do I need to go to a burn center? So DeepView is going to be very helpful there. And again, you can imagine how that is. And then treating would be at the burn center, where they're going to actually treat the burn wound because they have the most expertise. DeepView would tell them, this is a deep burn. It's not going to heal. Go to the operating room.
Okay.
And do that treatment. So the sooner that the decision can be made in the treatment center, the better. Patients can theoretically go home quicker, get the proper treatment done, the skin grafting or tissue substitute, we call it. So it helps in many ways. So I would say both triage and treatment.
Okay. And one last point on this topic. DeepView gives a binary output, right? But it is capturing a lot of information there, right? Can burn surgeons use some of this other data to treat better and treat more precisely and more timely?
Yes. So you've done good homework because it's always binary. When you do AI, this is an important thing because we're rambling, we're talking anyway. So it's easier. It's hard. Anything you do is hard. But in AI, it's better if you just have two choices, A or B, and in this case, it's binary. A pixel is a healing pixel or a not healing pixel.
Okay.
But you can say it's taken hundreds of millions of dollars and many years and billions and trillions of pixels to train this algorithm. So I cannot overemphasize how much work has been put into DeepView. In addition, we've done burn biopsies. I talked about ground truth earlier in our discussion. The biopsies are the ultimate ground truth, where we actually look under a microscope and determine that a particular part of a wound is going to heal. So all that's to say that it's extremely well trained to be able to predict this binary output. So your question is, how else can it help? TBSA is total body surface area. And again, when you triage a patient to a burn center and how much fluid you give and how much resuscitation you give is dependent upon the body surface area. So DeepView will also be able to tell you what percentage of the patient's body is burned. So not only is the binary output healing or not healing, but how much of a patient's body is damaged.